15 years had passed since the day Anakin Skywalker and Grand Admiral Thrawn joined forces to bring down Darth Sidious. It was a moment seared into the collective memory of the galaxy, a sudden and unexpected alliance between a Jedi once torn by the dark side and a brilliant Imperial strategist who had measured the odds and found the Emperor's rule too disastrous for any kind of stable future. That alliance, forged out of desperate necessity, had altered the course of countless lives, spawning both hope and fear among star systems that had been caught in the iron grip of Palpatine's regime. Now, over a decade after Sidious's downfall, the galaxy struggled to find its new equilibrium, a fragile tapestry woven from the threads of old loyalties, personal ambitions, and genuine aspirations for peace. Anakin Skywalker stood at a broad observation window inside the new Imperial complex rising over the luminous skyline of Coruscant. The city-planet's surface sprawled beneath him in a riot of blinking lights and shimmering silhouettes, each structure boasting centuries of stories, both glorious and grim. A swirl of small transports and personal flyers drifted by, the bustle of Coruscant's perpetual motion. Anakin had watched the same view many nights during the war, and yet it always looked different. In recent years, he had worked tirelessly to guide the galaxy along a more just path, forever mindful of how perilously easy it was for power to corrupt even the best intentions. The room behind him was quiet except for the faint hum of ventilators. Once, these halls belonged to the Emperor himself, haunted by the swirl of dark power that Sidious had wielded with terrible mastery. But in the aftermath of that final confrontation, many of the old Imperial strongholds had been repurposed or outright demolished. New offices, training halls, and secure meeting rooms now occupied spaces that once echoed with the Emperor's sinister plotting. Anakin's reflection on the transparent windowpane showed a man who bore the lines of age differently than he might have, had destiny followed the path of his original downfall. His hair, streaked with a hint of gray at the temples, marked the passage of time, and the light in his eyes hinted at a man both tempered by experience and continually tested by moral burdens. He was still tall, with a commanding presence, but less of the furious energy that once radiated from him in 1,000 battles. Instead, a more measured calm had settled into his posture. Today, Anakin had a meeting scheduled with Grand Admiral Thrawn, who had managed to maintain his rank through the transitional chaos that followed Sidious's demise. Thrawn's brilliance in military strategy had played a pivotal role in ensuring the final confrontation ended decisively, and though a few of the new Senate factions questioned allowing any former Imperial officer such influence, it could not be denied that the Chisa's intellect kept the galaxy from fracturing in a dozen vicious civil wars. Thrawn had orchestrated the disarmament of the worst Imperial remnants, negotiated treaties with the Alliance, and conceived a delicate economic plan to rebuild war-ravaged systems. And for 15 years, he and Anakin had walked a cautious path together, checking each other's instincts, forging an unconventional partnership that mystified their many observers. Behind Anakin, the door slid open. The measured clack of boots on polished floors announced Thrawn's arrival. He entered with that signature air of composed confidence, clad in the crisp white uniform he had worn so many years, though now bereft of Imperial insignia that had fallen out of favor. Instead, his uniform bore the emblem of the Galactic Coalition, a rebranding that attempted to merge the better aspects of the old Empire's discipline with the egalitarian ideals of the Alliance. Thrawn's blue skin and glowing red eyes set him apart from most of the galaxy's inhabitants, and there was always an undercurrent of curiosity among those who beheld him, an uneasy wonder if they were dealing with a brilliant ally or a cunning adversary. Yet in Thrawn's mind, victory for the galaxy as a whole far surpassed any petty personal advantage. Without waiting for further exchange, Thrawn spoke, his voice low and refined. "I hope I'm not late, Skywalker. I had a short meeting with the Bathan delegation. They remain unsettled about resource allocations for reconstruction in the Outer Rim. I trust you'll find the latest projections reassuring." Anakin turned from the window, regarding the Grand Admiral. "You're precisely on time, but I have to confess, I'm becoming weary of placating the Bathans. Ever since they lost so many of their intelligence assets during the final campaign, they've been uneasy about the direction of the Coalition. Their demands for more trade concessions feel never-ending." Thrawn inclined his head, Their intelligence networks were essential in the days of rebellion and the war against Sidious. Now they believe they deserve the lion's share of the spoils, to put it plainly. They fear being overshadowed in this new order, something we must factor into any negotiation. Anakin nodded, the lines of tension in his brow showing. Of course, send me your data and I'll review it tonight. In the meantime, how are the other delegations responding to the reintegration process? The Grand Admiral allowed a subtle smile. Our progress, despite the inevitable friction, is remarkable when compared to the near anarchy that followed Sidious's fall. Systems that once seethed with rebellion or cowered under imperial might are now engaging in dialogue. Sometimes painfully slow, but progress nonetheless. There is, however, one sector that has risen to our attention. The pentor system in the mid-rim. We've lost contact with 3 coalition envoys there. Anakin's expression darkened. A kidnapping? Or a defection? Thrawn paused in that deliberate way of his, as though choosing each word like a precious artifact. Unclear. Our intelligence suggests that local warlords may be employing clandestine strategies to force concessions or earn ransoms. Pirate activity is also on the rise in that region. We can't rule out that some old imperial loyalists, who remained hidden all these years, are orchestrating disruptions to test our resolve. The situation is tense. Anakin turned his gaze back toward the window, letting a weary sigh escape. It's never over, is it? Once, I believed that defeating Sidious meant peace, that we could rebuild and let the galaxy breathe. But sometimes I wonder if war just changes its shape, never truly disappearing. Thrawn stepped forward, standing beside him. Peace is a constant endeavor, Skywalker, a strategy that requires vigilance, compassion, and strength. You of all people know how power can corrupt if left unchecked. The Emperor's defeat was a beginning, not an end. Anakin closed his eyes for a brief moment, letting the Force wash through him. Ever since rediscovering his balanced connection to it, striving for the light, aware of the darkness, he had made a conscious effort to remain grounded. Once, he believed that the Force would show him a grand destiny, but now he understood that destiny was shaped by the small, day-to-day choices. I'll handle Pentoras, he said softly. I'll go there myself, speak with the local leaders if that's what it takes. I sense that the galaxy needs to see me out there, not as a figure locked away in a fortress on Coruscant, but as someone willing to intervene personally for the sake of peace. You'll need more than good intentions, said Thrawn. Pirates and warlords respect strength. Show them you're willing to defend the coalition's interests. Anakin nodded, determination shining in his gaze. I'll take a small contingent. Sometimes all it takes is a demonstration of unity between the Jedi and the coalition navy. Let them see that the guardians of peace and the protectors of stability stand together. Thrawn gave a curt nod. I'll arrange for a vessel. Shall we use the newly commissioned Star Destroyer, the Vigilant? It's a symbol of how the old designs can be repurposed to serve a better cause. It should also send a clear message that this coalition, though it strives for negotiation, won't shy away from an assertive show of force if necessary. Agreed, said Anakin. Thank you, Thrawn. Thrawn pivoted with precision, heading for the door. I will have my staff prepare the necessary details. May the Force be with us. As the door slid shut behind him, the subdued hum of the new Imperial complex continued. Anakin lingered by the window, letting his thoughts wander back to that fateful day 15 years earlier, recalling the swirl of lightsabers, the echo of thunderous explosions, and the raw power unleashed when he and Thrawn cornered Sidious. The Emperor's defiant sneer, the cold hatred in his eyes, was still etched in Anakin's mind. He had once teetered on the edge of eternal darkness under that gaze. Yet in the final hour, he chose to stand for something greater than himself, something that might heal the galaxy instead of breaking it further. Not for the first time, Anakin asked himself whether his redemption was complete. Over 15 years, he had tried to prove himself worthy of the trust placed in him. Yet he knew some would always remember how close he had come to being Sidious's enforcer, the dreaded Darth Vader. The galaxy's memory was long, and the scars ran deep, so he put his faith in each day's actions, believing that what truly mattered was ensuring that no single power could plunge the galaxy into fear again. A small voice in his mind, part reassurance and part warning, reminded him that it was all too easy to think one's cause was righteous. He finally pulled his attention away from the glimmering cityscape. Another day of negotiations, battles, and delicate alliances awaited him. A meeting with the Jedi Council was scheduled soon. A new council formed from the ashes of the old, now including allies who once found themselves on opposing sides of the war. The Force resonated through all living things, calling for balance. Anakin's responsibility was to answer that call. Hours later, the small Jedi Council convened in an austere chamber of the Reformed Temple. The old Jedi Temple had endured numerous structural damages during the Emperor's reign, but careful reconstruction had restored its spires and sanctuaries, albeit with a more modern touch. Entering those halls always stirred conflicting emotions within Anakin: nostalgia, regret, and a cautious hope for what the Jedi could become. Here, the new council was not limited to 12. Instead, it spanned various ranks of Jedi Knights and Masters, with rotating seats for representative voices from across the galaxy. The shift in structure was an acknowledgement of past mistakes, acknowledging that cloistered isolation had not served the Jedi well in the face of a galactic crisis. Seated around a circular platform were several familiar figures. Master Stas Ali, who had somehow survived the purge after faking her own death, now presided over the council with a gentle wisdom. She gave Anakin a warm nod as he entered. Alongside her sat a collection of other notable Jedi: Quinlan Vos, returned from his self-imposed exile; Master Sandralig, who had been discovered wounded but alive in the temple ruins years before; and Ahsoka Tano, who had left the Order only to find her way back when everything was on the brink of destruction. Ahsoka's gaze connected with Anakin's, a soft, knowing smile forming on her lips. The two of them had faced immeasurable trials, and their bond had been stretched but never truly broken. She was a key figure in the new council, often representing unorthodox thinking and bridging gaps between the Jedi and various factions. Master Stas Ali began the session. "We sense a disturbance, Anakin." Rumors swirl in the outer rim of small enclaves of dark side practitioners, opportunists who prey on local populations and promise salvation through hidden arts. The council requests your insights, especially now that you're planning a mission to the Pentor system. We suspect that these enclaves might extend their influence there. Anakin settled into his seat. "I've heard the same rumors. For 15 years, we've tried to keep watch for any sign of Sith resurgence or dark side cults. But they're like weeds. One is uprooted, another appears in a distant corner of the galaxy. I'll investigate if I find any trace in Pentoras." Quinlan Vos, arms folded, leaned forward. "Some on the council suggest we send a team of Jedi Shadows to root out these enclaves more aggressively. How do you feel about that approach?" Anakin drew a measured breath. The notion of hunting down elusive dark side practitioners carried echoes of the purge. He remembered how menacing it had felt to be on the receiving end of a relentless inquisition. "We have to be cautious, Quinlan. Going on a crusade against any rumored dark side user could ignite paranoia and drive them deeper underground. We should proceed, but do so carefully and with evidence. The last thing we want is to replicate the Emperor's methods in the name of preventing another Sidious." Ahsoka nodded. "I agree. Our mission is to protect life and maintain balance. That means using the Force to guide us, not fear." Stas Ali looked thoughtfully at them both. "We will continue our diplomatic efforts while you're in Pentoras, Anakin. If you sense the presence of any organized dark side movement, inform us. The Council stands ready to support you. Our resources are greater now than at any time since the Clone Wars, though I caution we remain mindful of our limitations." The meeting concluded with final remarks from each council member, after which Anakin made his way out into the temple corridors, Ahsoka catching up to walk alongside him. They spoke in subdued tones, recalling how the temple walls had once echoed with the laughter of Padawans and the measured footsteps of Jedi Masters. Now, the new generation of initiates darted through the halls, training in lightsaber technique or quietly studying in the archives. It was a sight both comforting and poignant. "I heard about Pentoras," Ahsoka said. It's not just warlords and pirates. Some folks are talking about mercenary groups styling themselves as knights for hire. They wear scavenged lightsabers, red ones. It's probably just rumor, but I thought you should know. Anakin paused, brows knitting. Red sabers. The memory of Darth Sidious's blade and the deeper, more personal recollection of his own red blade as Vader flickered in his mind. I'll be on the lookout. Are you volunteering to come along? Ahsoka smirked. I've got my own assignment, but I would in a heartbeat. The Council wants me to investigate disappearances near the Outer Rim supply routes. Nothing major, but it might connect to these rumored enclaves. May the Force be with you, Master. They parted ways, each off to their respective duties. Sometimes it weighed on Anakin, how seldom they could simply chat or remember simpler times. Then he would chide himself, acknowledging those simpler times were illusions all along. War had been stirring even in the earliest days of the Clone Wars. Even before that, the seeds of Sidious's grand plan had been sown. The galaxy had never truly been at peace in his lifetime. Perhaps this new era, despite the friction and complexity, was as close as they'd ever come. 2 days later, Anakin boarded the Vigilant. A streamlined star destroyer brimming with cutting-edge technology gleaned from countless star systems. No longer the symbol of Imperial terror, it was now outfitted to serve search and rescue operations as effectively as it could wage war. The Coalition's leadership saw it as a statement piece. The old war machine forging ahead to safeguard, not subjugate. If anything, Thrawn believed that the Vigilant's presence would lend credence to the new regime's resolve. Docked in orbit above Coruscant, the Vigilant gleamed under the planet's reflected light. Rows of TIE interceptors, redesigned to minimize the intimidation factor, waited in the hangar bays. The crew was a mix of men and women, human and alien, wearing the uniform of the Galactic Coalition. Each saluted when Anakin passed, though their eyes glimmered with curiosity. Tales of the Jedi who had once been the Chosen One, who had once worn the mantle of Darth Vader, still coursed through the rumor mills. Some viewed him with awe, others with suspicion, but all recognized his presence as a testament to how drastically the galaxy had changed. Captain Rash Garnet, a slender woman with sharp features and an air of unflappable composure, stepped forward to greet him on the command deck. General Skywalker, it's an honor to have you aboard. Grand Admiral Thrawn sent instructions for our immediate departure. The hyperdrive coordinates for Pentoras are ready. Our official cover is a diplomatic mission, though we are prepared for conflict if necessary. Anakin inclined his head, his voice calm but resolute. Thank you, Captain. Let's not go looking for trouble, but we must be ready to protect our delegates. Carry on. She snapped a crisp salute. Yes, sir. The star lines stretched into infinity as the Vigilant leapt into hyperspace, forging ahead through a swirling corridor of blue-white light. Anakin spent those hours studying intelligence reports on Pentoras, reviewing population data, known factions, and suspected criminal networks. Each new piece of information reminded him just how vast and complicated governance was. During the Clone Wars, everything had seemed more straightforward. A set of battles to fight, enemy lines to break. Now it was about hearts and minds, stability, trade, infrastructure, and an endless parade of political entanglements. His mind drifted to Padme at times, a pang of what-ifs hitting him. In this timeline, his betrayal had not led to her death. She had survived, though the trauma of nearly losing everything had taken a toll. She had eventually chosen to step away from the brutal center of politics and focus on humanitarian efforts in the Outer Rim, forging alliances and aiding refugees from worlds decimated by the war. Their relationship had been mended slowly, a process that forced Anakin to confront his guilt and her to grapple with her heartbreak. Though they spent long periods apart, the bond between them had grown stronger after Sidious's defeat. Each meeting was sweeter for the time spent away, each parting an echo of the painful days they thought they'd lost each other forever. He also thought of Leia and Luke, still children at the time of Sidious's downfall, but now grown and forging their own paths in this new galaxy. Luke had embarked on a path parallel to his father's, joining the new Jedi Order to help rebuild and learn the ways of the Force. Leia, with the fierce devotion to justice she'd inherited from her mother, found herself in the thick of political negotiations, though less as a senator, more as an emissary unafraid to step into the harshest corners of the galaxy to champion those who had no voice. Sometimes, father and daughter found themselves at odds, each pushing for what they believed was the best course of action, but Anakin marveled at her fire. If the galaxy had once been starved for hope, Leia was determined to feed it. Late on the second day of the journey, a small droid beeped at Anakin's elbow, prompting him that they would soon exit hyperspace. The swirling tunnel of light collapsed back into a star-studded blackness, revealing the Pentora's system, a star ringed by shimmering cosmic debris and a series of planets. Pentora's Prime, a dusty orange sphere, was the seat of what passed for governance in the sector. Among the outer orbits, smaller planetoids boasted hidden smugglers' dens and pirate hideouts. Immediately, the vigilance sensors picked up signs of multiple vessels, some registering official coalition signals, others broadcasting incomplete or suspicious transponder codes. Captain Garnet leaned forward over the sensor station. "General Skywalker, we have an inbound transmission from the local authority on Pentora's Prime. They're insisting we identify ourselves and our purpose." Anakin moved beside her, scanning the readouts. "Open a channel." The deck officer tapped a console, and a crackling voice emerged, heavy with tension. "Unidentified Star Destroyer, this is Pentora's Prime Control. State your business or you will be considered hostile." Anakin cleared his throat, projecting a calm authority. "This is General Anakin Skywalker of the Galactic Coalition, aboard the Vigilant. We come on a diplomatic mission with supplies and negotiators. We were under the impression we would be welcomed." A brief pause. "General Skywalker, your arrival was not confirmed by our local council. Nevertheless, we read your IFF. Proceed to geostationary orbit. Any deviation from the submitted flight path will be taken as an act of aggression." Garnet frowned at the threat in the voice, but Anakin held up a hand. "Copy that, Pentora's Prime Control. We will comply." With that exchange, it became evident that conditions were tense. The official line might be that Pentora's had accepted the coalition's overtures, but distrust ran deep. The Vigilant slipped into the designated orbit, overshadowing the planet's arid browns and reds. From the vantage of the command deck, it looked peaceful enough, but sensor scans revealed scattered hotspots of conflict, bandit raids, and underpopulated areas suffering from famine and water shortages. It was a harsh world, battered by war, forced to accept uneasy alliances with the pirate clans for protection. Shortly after, a shaky landing permit arrived, instructing Anakin and a small envoy to set down in the capital city. The city, known as Harridan's Basin, was set in a massive bowl of rock and dust, ringed by towering cliffs that offered a natural fortress. Anakin selected 2 Jedi Knights and a handful of coalition officers to accompany him. Captain Garnet insisted that he take at least 2 platoons of troops for security, but Anakin declined. Too large a show of force could push the local warlords into open hostility. He wanted to project strength, but in a measured way. They boarded a sleek shuttle and descended through the planet's dusty atmosphere. Harsh sunlight glinted off the shuttle's hull, the engines whining as they navigated swirling gusts. The rock walls of the basin rose around them, a testament to the planet's raw, unforgiving nature. Below, Anakin saw squat buildings huddled together, a labyrinth of winding streets packed with cargo containers and tents, the entire settlement scarred by years of resource struggles. The landing pad was lined with a small contingent of local militia. Their armor was patched and mismatched, the weapons they held a mix of battered blasters and local slug throwers. Standing in front was a tall man wearing something akin to a mercenary's patchwork uniform, flanked by a pair of stern-faced aides. The moment Anakin and his party disembarked, the man stepped forward, his expression guarded, though not hostile. His skin was weathered by Pentora's harsh climate, and a half-faded scar cut across his cheek. "General Skywalker, I am Baron Haridan," he said in a deep voice. "I speak for the City Council of Pentora's Prime. We expected a smaller delegation." Anakin offered a polite nod. "Baron Haridan, a pleasure to meet you. I bring only a modest group, 2 Jedi Knights and a few coalition officers. I trust we can proceed with our talks peacefully." Baron Haridan narrowed his eyes slightly, as though trying to size up Anakin's intentions. "We shall see. The council convenes in an hour. You'll be escorted there. Please don't stray from the designated route." Anakin sensed the tension crackling beneath the surface. Haridan was obviously a powerful figure here, perhaps the link between official governance and the local warlords. Words were carefully chosen, boundaries clearly marked. One misstep, and the precarious peace could shatter. With a silent signal to his companions, Anakin followed the Baron's escort, stepping down from the landing pad into the labyrinthine streets of Haridan's basin. The air smelled of dust and engine fumes, laced with the tang of metal from the canyon walls. Stalls lined the path, offering everything from grilled local reptiles to mechanical salvage. Sentients of various species, Twi'leks, humans, Devaronians, Celestins, went about their day, though the presence of armed guards made the atmosphere heavy with a quiet wariness. As they wove through the crowd, Anakin felt the force around him, pulsing with undercurrents of fear, anger, and a desperate hope. He recalled the promise made when Sidious was defeated, that this galaxy, for so long suffocated by tyranny, would find a way to prosper. Now, confronted by such stark conditions, he understood anew that the dream of a stable galaxy was not a quick fix. It required patience, empathy, and unrelenting dedication. They arrived at a low-slung building ringed by spiky barriers, a makeshift fortress. Inside, a rough-hewn council chamber featured a long table with an assortment of anxious-looking officials. Some wore local garb, dusty robes, and desert gear. Others were clearly mercenaries or warlords disguised as council members, their posture more martial, their gazes more predatory. Baron Haridan gestured to an empty chair at the table's head. "General, if you will." Anakin studied the table briefly, then took a seat. His Jedi companions and officers stood slightly behind him, alert but composed. The Force told Anakin that these men and women were not at ease, and that there might be hidden agendas swirling in the background. A silver-haired woman, possibly in her 50s, tapped a datapad on the table. "I'm Counselor Riska. We're grateful the Coalition is taking an interest in Pentoras. But we have pressing matters. Ongoing pirate raids, water shortages, and rumors of outsiders meddling in our affairs. We want to know exactly how the Coalition intends to help." Anakin offered a placid smile. "We come with supplies and the promise of Coalition support to rebuild infrastructure. We also carry a potential trade agreement that would grant Pentoras easier access to galactic markets. Of course, we need stable leadership and a commitment from local forces that the resources sent here won't be commandeered by warlords or bandits." He let his gaze drift meaningfully across the assembled faces. Several members shifted uncomfortably. A burly Weequay warlord in battered armor snorted. "Local forces are the only protection these people have. The Coalition is 1,000 parsecs away, and your help is rarely free." Anakin kept his voice level. "You misunderstand. The Coalition isn't trying to seize control. We've seen the harm that can come from centralized tyranny. We aim to work with you to ensure that needed supplies reach civilian populations and that criminals don't hold entire systems hostage." A slender Twi'lek official, her leku wrapped in bandages, spoke next. "But your Coalition is a reformed empire to many of us. And you, General Skywalker, once served at Sidious's side. How do we know you won't bring a new brand of oppression?" Anakin felt the sting of the question but kept his composure. "I won't deny my past, but that is precisely why I stand before you now, offering the alternative we fought to establish. You can judge us by our actions. If the Coalition fails to provide genuine assistance, you can turn us away." Baron Haridan folded his arms. "Perhaps we should see these supplies and trade deals you speak of. Actions do speak louder than words." Before Anakin could respond, the council room's main door slid open, and a tense hush rippled across the table. In walked a group of 5 individuals, each dressed in dark robes or scavenged armor. The lead figure wore a helmet reminiscent of ancient Sith designs, though battered and pieced together from fragments. Hanging at the figure's waist was a lightsaber, its hilt scorched black. Everyone in the room bristled. The Baron's eyes flicked to Anakin, uneasy, as though uncertain how he might react. The robed figure stepped forward with an air of chilling confidence. When he spoke, his voice emerged from behind the helmet, modulated into a low rasp. "So, the stories are true. The great Anakin Skywalker comes to Pentoras. I had to see for myself." A wave of caution swept through Anakin's mind. He could sense the dark side around this newcomer, swirling in faint eddies. Yet it wasn't as potent as a trained Sith. Perhaps a self-styled dark devotee or one of the rumored enclaves. "You seem to have me at a disadvantage," Anakin said evenly, rising from his seat. The figure tilted his head, the visor glaring with a faint red glow. "I am Darth Corthus, heir to the power you once held as Vader. While you groveled for redemption, some of us saw your potential and recognized the gift you threw away. The galaxy trembles at the idea of true strength. But here you'll find we are unafraid." A collective shuffle of alarm spread among the council members. Baron Harridan's knuckles whitened on the table's edge, sweat beading on the brows of the others. The warlord, who had scoffed before, now looked far less certain. Anakin felt his heart pound with the memory of the name Darth Vader, an identity he'd worked so desperately to shed. He also registered the possibility this Darth Corthus was partly a pretender. But the threat was real enough if he had even a fraction of the dark side's power. "I know nothing of you," Anakin replied firmly, "but I sense you're dabbling in darkness. It's a path that promises power and ends in chaos. The galaxy's seen enough tyranny. We have no wish to trade one brand of oppression for another." Darth Corthus let out a sharp laugh that echoed in the chamber. "Tyranny? The Emperor was a relic. Weak in the end. True strength lies in seizing destiny for oneself, unshackled by codes and councils." Anakin steadied himself, drawing on the Force for calm. "I won't let you endanger these people. Pentoras need stability, not a new war." The robed figure's gloved hand twitched near his lightsaber hilt. "Don't lecture me about war, Jedi. If Pentora sides with your coalition, it will suffer the same fate as the worlds the Emperor crushed. Perhaps you should walk away before this escalates." The tension in the council chamber grew electric. Anakin could see the fear in the eyes of local officials who realized they were caught between factions. One that might reassert a different kind of empire and one that seemed to embrace the shadow of the Sith. He remembered vividly the ruin the dark side had wrought on the galaxy. With a subtle shift, he placed a hand near his own lightsaber. The two Jedi Knights behind him also stood ready, though they did not ignite their blades. Baron Harridan struggled to maintain composure. "We said we didn't want another war. That's why we tried to remain neutral. But neutrality is becoming impossible. The pirates and warlords bleed us dry, and now these Sith or whatever they are threaten to consume us if we don't pledge loyalty." Darth Corthus raised a hand, the Force swirling ominously around his fingers. A small wave of invisible energy rippled through the chamber, rattling cups and datapads on the table. Several council members gasped. "Pledge loyalty?" the masked figure hissed. "You only survive so long as I permit. The moment I choose, you are at my mercy." Anakin felt a surge of protective resolve. The old anger, the spark of the powerful knight he once was, threatened to flare. But he forced it down, remembering that aggression fed the dark side. "Stand down," he said quietly. "No one has to die here." The intruder's helmet tilted in a mocking gesture. 15 years, Skywalker. 15 years since you betrayed your own destiny and conspired with that Grand Admiral to slay Sidious. Did you truly think the dark side would vanish with him? It lives on in us, in me, and in those who dare to claim power without the shackles of your Jedi code. Quick as lightning, the robed figure ignited a lightsaber blade of crackling red, bathing the chamber in a sinister glow. With a single fluid motion, Anakin activated his own lightsaber, a brilliant blue beam. The room erupted in alarm, officials scrambling away from the table. The two Jedi Knights flanked Anakin, sabers ignited in green and yellow, while the coalition officers drew their blasters. Darth Corthus leapt back, holding his weapon in a guarded stance. Behind him, his companions brandished various weapons, though not all carried lightsabers. Some hefted vibroblades or force pikes. Baron Haridan shouted protests, trying to regain control, but the confrontation had already escalated beyond mere words. Anakin sensed the swirl of fear and aggression rising like a storm. He kept his voice firm but calm. "This is not the way. Surrender. We can discuss your grievances." "Fool!" the masked figure spat. "We bow to no one." In a flash, a chaotic battle ignited. Red and blue sabers clashed, sending sparks dancing across the rough chamber walls. The two Jedi Knights engaged the robed henchmen. Anakin squared off directly with Darth Corthus, each blow of their lightsabers resonating with the hum of lethal energy. The council members ducked under tables, while the warlord and mercenaries found themselves pinned against the walls, unsure whether to intervene or flee. Anakin's focus narrowed to the masked figure before him. He recognized attempts at Sith techniques, sharp jabs of telekinetic energy, abrupt feints with flicks of the saber. But the raw brutality of Corthus's style lacked the refined cunning of Sidious or Dooku. Still, there was power in that rage. A new generation of dark practitioners had arisen, ignorant of many deeper Sith traditions yet dangerously potent in their own right. Their sabers locked in a sizzling cross. Corthus snarled from behind the visor, "I could restore your rightful place, Skywalker. Join me, and together we can do what Sidious never could, rule with absolute power, unburdened by the shadow of the old empire." Anakin held firm, the force flooding his muscles with calm strength. "You don't understand," he said, pressing forward. "I've walked that path. It only leads to ruin." He broke the lock, spinning low to sweep Corthus off balance. The masked figure dodged, but not before Anakin's blade caught the edge of his helmet, sending a shower of sparks. The dark figure recoiled, helmet partially slashed open to reveal a portion of a young face twisted with fury. Scars etched across his cheek, eyes flashing with a faint yellow tinge. The flicker of those eyes unsettled Anakin, a reminder of how the dark side once tainted his own gaze. Meanwhile, the other Jedi worked skillfully to disarm the robed followers. One knight used a series of precise thrusts to knock a vibroblade away, while the other unleashed a gentle but effective force push that sent two attackers sprawling. Blaster bolts from coalition officers pinned the remaining henchmen, who quickly saw they were outmatched. At the center, Anakin advanced on Corthus, who was breathing heavily but refusing to back down. "Impressive?" the masked man spat. "But you can't kill every dark disciple who emerges. Sooner or later, the dark side will claim another champion." Anakin shook his head, lightsaber raised but not striking. "It doesn't have to be this way. Put down your saber." With a guttural cry, Corthus lunged, blade arcing in a lethal overhead strike. Anakin shifted smoothly, parrying with a flick of his wrist. The red saber impacted the floor, kicking up a spray of sparks. In that instant, Anakin spun behind the dark acolyte, hooking the hilt from Corthus's grip and yanking it free with a forced pull. Unarmed and caught off balance, Corthus staggered. "Enough," Anakin said as he deactivated the red blade, tossing it aside. "This is over." Yet Corthus's eyes blazed with hatred. "You've only postponed the inevitable," he hissed, voice shaking. "The galaxy will never be free of the dark side. People crave power. A sudden jolt of the Force warned Anakin a heartbeat before an explosion rocked the chamber. Part of the ceiling caved in, showering the area with debris and dust. It came from outside, perhaps a bomb or a strike from one of the robed figure's associates. Shouts and screams filled the air, overshadowed by the deafening roar of collapsing masonry. Anakin and the Jedi Knights instinctively raised their hands, channeling the Force to shield the council members from falling rubble. A swirl of dust choked the room, visibility reduced to a few meters. Alarms blared, and the building groaned ominously. When the dust began to settle, Anakin frantically looked around for Corthus. The masked figure had used the chaos to vanish, leaving behind only a swirling sense of malevolent triumph in the Force. Coalition officers, coughing and disoriented, helped the council members out of the rubble. Both Jedi Knights coughed but appeared unharmed, using the Force to keep an invisible barrier overhead from total collapse. Baron Haridan emerged from under a broken section of table, coughing and shaken. What just happened? Anakin's expression was grim. It seems your local dark side devotee had backup. We need to evacuate. This structure might not hold. Haridan nodded feverishly. There's a shelter beneath the next block. Hurry. Outside, chaos reigned. Smoke rose from multiple points in the city, likely sabotage coordinated by Corthus's group to cover their escape. Sirens wailed, and people ran in every direction. The Vigilance comm channel crackled in Anakin's ear, with Captain Garnet's voice cutting through the static. General Skywalker. Sensors show multiple blasts across Harridan's basin. We're picking up a few unauthorized ships leaving orbit. One might be the group you encountered. Anakin took a quick glance at the swirling skies, trying to maintain composure amidst the panic. Deploy rescue craft. Try to lock onto them, but do not open fire in the city. We can't risk civilian casualties. Static followed, then Garnet responded, Copy, General. We're moving in. The next hours felt like a whirlwind. The priority became stabilizing the city and reassuring the Council that the Coalition would not abandon them in this time of crisis. The Jedi worked tirelessly, using the Force to help free trapped civilians, while Coalition medics set up triage centers. Baron Haridan, shaken from the near assassination, recognized that his city was in no position to face these new threats alone. Gradually, through the smoke and chaos, a strange alliance began to form. Local warlords and council officials realized they needed the Coalition's protection. When the fires were mostly out and the wounded tended to, Anakin finally stood in a makeshift command post near the city center. It was late into the night, and the planet's twin moons cast a pale glow over the wreckage. He felt exhausted but oddly energized by a sense of purpose. Every rescue, every frightened child comforted, every warlord stepping up to offer men and materials. These were steps toward the unity he dreamed of. He stared at the battered remains of the council building. The question loomed. Had Corthus escaped entirely? The Force answered with a dim sense of malevolence at the system's edge, a stain on the horizon of possibility. Though battered, that dark presence remained alive, plotting. He knew it would not end here. By dawn, news of the attempted attack had spread through the sector. Some speculated that these new self-proclaimed Sith were the real power behind the pirate clans, or perhaps puppets of a hidden master. Rumors multiplied, each rumor stoking the tension that had hovered over the galaxy since Sidious's fall. Some saw Corthus as a sign that a new Sith empire might emerge. Others believed it was just another fanatical cult that would soon vanish. Anakin and the new Jedi Council knew better. The dark side might be scattered, but it would not simply vanish. Its seeds took root in desperation and ambition, always seeking fertile ground. Amid the swirling uncertainties, however, a tangible sense of hope had taken hold in Harridan's basin. The arrival of Coalition relief ships, the Jedi's on-the-ground assistance, and Anakin's personal involvement convinced many locals that perhaps the stories of a kinder, more just galactic order were real. For once, a star destroyer in orbit did not loom as a threat, but as a guardian. And so, even in the rubble, they began to talk about rebuilding. Over the next few days, Anakin worked almost ceaselessly, coordinating with Thrawn through secure holocommunications. The Grand Admiral's calm voice offered strategic insight, guiding Anakin on which local alliances to foster and which to avoid. Thrawn also promised to dispatch an intelligence team to track down any clue of Corthus's whereabouts, so that they could sever this dark side cult at the root. Though some advised a heavier hand, deploying legions of troops to scour the planet, Anakin refused. They needed to show that the Coalition's approach was different from the Empire's old methods of subjugation. Baron Haridan, emerging from the crisis as a sort of de facto leader with the warlords now chastened, declared publicly that Pentoras would sign a provisional treaty with the Coalition. The terms were simple: shipments of clean water, medtech, and agricultural support in exchange for local cooperation in rooting out pirates and any dark enclaves. To everyone's relief, at least some measure of stability began to take shape. But at night, when Anakin allowed himself a moment of solitude, he felt a pang of unease. The confrontation with Darth Corthus replayed in his mind. That voice, so convinced that Anakin had forsaken the true path of power, echoed old doubts from a lifetime ago. He reminded himself he had changed, that he served life, not domination. Yet the memory clung to him, a reminder that the lure of darkness, once awakened, was never truly silent. A week later, as the reconstruction efforts progressed and new trade routes were being charted, Anakin received an urgent holocall from the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Master Stas Ali's holographic image flickered before him in the command post, her expression grave. "Anakin, we've just received word that a group calling themselves the Children of the Shadow made a coordinated strike on 3 separate worlds in the Outer Rim. The details are murky, but it appears they have harnessed some kind of unstable force artifact. We believe these are connected to Corthus or cults like his." Anakin's face hardened. "Where have they hit?" "Tatooine, Malastare, and a small colony near the unknown regions. Casualties are reported. Survivors speak of red-bladed figures, robed in dark garb. We suspect multiple cells working in tandem, and their methods mirror what you encountered in Pentora's." His thoughts churned. The galaxy's large, but the timing can't be a coincidence. "I'll be leaving Pentora's soon. The situation is stabilizing here. I'll confer with Grand Admiral Thrawn, and then I'll head wherever I'm most needed." Stas Ali nodded, her hologram flickering in the dim light. "May the Force guide you. We cannot allow this new darkness to spread. Too many systems remain vulnerable." As the transmission ended, Anakin stared at the blank space where the hologram had stood. The flicker of red sabers, the memory of that hateful masked glare, burned behind his eyes. Sometimes he wondered if this was the universe's way of testing him, forcing him to confront the living embodiments of his past choices. 15 years, and still the echoes of Sidious's legacy rippled outward, manifesting in emboldened dark cults, pirates, and warlords. The victory he and Thrawn had won felt more and more like the start of a never-ending vigil. He emerged from the command post, blinking in the bright Pentora's sun. Soldiers bustled around, unloading crates of supplies or assisting local laborers in rebuilding damaged water filtration facilities. Children ran through the dusty streets, eyeing the off-worlders with curiosity rather than fear. Up on a ridge, a group of weary warlords stood in conversation with coalition officers, presumably forging new security arrangements. The swirling dust in the air took on a golden glow under the sun's harsh rays, making the entire settlement appear both vibrant and delicate at the same time. A child tugged at Anakin's robe. He looked down to see a small boy, dusty hair and wide brown eyes, staring up at him. The child held out a small carved figurine in the shape of a starfighter. "I made this," the boy said shyly. "You can have it." Touched by the gesture, Anakin crouched down to eye level, gently accepting the tiny carving. "Thank you," he said softly, mustering a smile. "What's your name?" "Rico," the child replied. "My dad says your big ship is here to help us. Is that true?" Anakin nodded, feeling a swell of warmth. "We're doing our best." He handed the boy a small ration bar from his belt pouch as a trade, and the boy's eyes lit up. Before scurrying off, Rico paused, glancing at the lightsaber hilt on Anakin's belt. "Is that a laser sword? Did you fight a monster with it?" A flicker of sadness crossed Anakin's face. "Yes, but not a monster. Just someone who made bad choices. Take care, Rico." The boy ran back to a group of children, showing off the ration bar. Anakin rose, the carved starfighter in his hand. It struck him that for all the talk of treaties, strategic alliances, and the war against the dark side, at the heart of it all were these simple, everyday lives. People who just wanted to survive and maybe find a bit of happiness. That was worth fighting for, worth every risk and every sleepless night. When he returned to the Vigilant later that evening, Thrawn's image awaited him in the holo-conference chamber. The Grand Admiral's posture was typically precise, eyes gleaming red in the dim projection. "Skywalker," Your reports indicate the pentor's situation has stabilized. Well done. But we have more urgent matters. The Jedi Temple has confirmed multiple dark side incursions. We suspect this is the tip of the iceberg. Anakin folded his arms. I'm ready. Where do you need me? Thrawn's tone was calm but with an undertone of urgency. I'm authorizing an expanded operation. Our intelligence indicates several hidden enclaves in the Outer Rim. I recommend we strike them surgically, capturing or eliminating key leaders. I'd like you to spearhead one of these missions with a combined force of Jedi and Coalition troops. A memory flashed of Corthus's mocking laugh, the swirl of dust and smoke in the council chamber. Anakin exhaled slowly. Understood. We can't let these splinter groups fester. But we need to be measured. We're not the Empire. Yes, Thrawn agreed. And that's precisely why your presence is necessary. I suspect some of these cults intentionally provoke us, hoping we'll respond with overwhelming force and drive frightened systems back into their arms. We must be clever. We must be just. Anakin nodded, feeling the weight settle on his shoulders. I'll coordinate with the Jedi Council. The Vigilant can provide a staging ground. If we move quickly, we might prevent more attacks. Thrawn's image flickered. Indeed, I'm sending you the latest intelligence on the planet Temera. It's an old Imperial outpost turned pirate haven. We believe Corthus or one of his associates might have established a presence. You'll depart as soon as possible. As the transmission ended, Anakin stood in the silent chamber. Outside, the hum of the ship's engines and the chatter of the crew provided a steady backdrop. He clipped his lightsaber to his belt and headed for the bridge. The carved starfighter from Rico nestled in a pocket of his robe. The future of the galaxy, even 15 years after Sidious's fall, was still uncertain. Yet with each small act, like a child's carving gifted to a Jedi, hope burned bright against the darkness. He stepped onto the command deck, meeting Captain Garnet's expectant gaze. Captain, he said, voice firm, plot a course for Temera in the Outer Rim. We have work to do. She saluted. Yes, General. Moments later, the Vigilant turned away from the dusty orb of Pentoras, thrusters flaring as it set a new heading. Anakin watched the planet recede on the view screen, thinking of the progress made, the hidden threats revealed, and the countless souls across the galaxy yearning for stability and peace. The Star Destroyer slipped into hyperspace, carrying with it both the burdens of the past and the promise of a future shaped by choices rooted in compassion rather than fear. Though the specter of Darth Sidious was gone, the Force rippled with the echoes of old hatreds and new ambitions. On that day, 15 years after the Emperor's defeat, Anakin Skywalker resolved himself once more. He would stand guard at the gate between light and darkness. With Thrawn's strategic brilliance, the Jedi Council's guidance, and the fragile unity of the Galactic Coalition, he believed there was still a chance for the galaxy to find its way. As the swirling hyperspace tunnel enveloped the Vigilant, he closed his eyes, reaching out with the Force, letting its currents guide him. For the sake of every child offering a humble gift, for the sake of every world striving to rebuild, for the sake of a galaxy that dared to hope, he would not falter. He had already seen how a single choice could change the destiny of millions, and he was determined that, this time, the choice would be guided by the light.